Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Tim Errickson. I'm the artistic director of the Boomerang Theater Company, and I'm here with playwright Lauren Ferebee. There she
Hello.
is. Um, yes, so we're gonna chat a little bit about some of the things that Lauren works on and some of the things that Lauren does as she works, and sort of just try and have an informal conversation in a very weird uh, setting over Zoom. Uh, so we were talking a little bit before we started, but like,
Hmm.
how how is writing for you while you're quarantined? Like, what's that like?
Yeah, I feel a little bit guilty because I've actually been really enjoying quarantine as a time to write for me, which is also because I'm a grad student. Like I've had a lot of time to write and projects to work on.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think when I started quarantining, I have one of my classmates was like, oh, there's a screenwriting contest. It's due in like a week, but we have all this time. Like, let's just write a screenplay this week and turn it in because it's like a lot of money.
Sure, that's what you
So
do in a week, right? Like,
right. So
pages.
yeah, we sort of egged each other on to write screenplays in a week and turn them in, and it was
Yeah.
like, and it was easy because it was like there wasn't really a lot going on that we couldn't kind of like move out of our way,
Mhm.
other than ourselves. So we just kind of sat down and did it. It was like exercising a whole lot, where you're like sitting there going like, "Come on, 10 more pages, you can do this." And actually, I took Brilliance, which is the play that we did a reading of, and turned it into a screenplay, which is a really fun
That's
exercise. And it actually worked really well as a screenplay. I was like, oh, this is nice. So
How do you like screenwriting versus playwriting?
I really enjoy it. It's something I've been doing more. I took TV writing twice, so this is my second round of TV writing, and I really enjoy it. I think partially because I'm a really visual writer. Like I write a lot of sort of visual symbols and think about things in visual metaphor,
Hmm.
and it's really fun to be able to highlight that in a different way. And the adaptation process is really fun because I felt like the play has different elements that I wasn't able to replicate, but then there were things I was able to like really play up and like change because of the different medium.
Yeah,
Um, so I feel like screenwriting is a really fun, different way to write. And the adaptation process made it clear to me like how different the two mediums really are, but how they are really good at doing different things.
yeah. Do you find you have a lot less dialogue in screenplays?
I do. Yeah. I spend a lot more time thinking about how to communicate things visually. Or yeah, I wrote a pilot. So I'm sort of like putting together this pilot package because I'm going to my third year of grad school. So I wrote this pilot, 68-page pilot, for my TV writing class. Because again, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. Like I have this time,
Why
I'm
not?
just going to sit down and do this. And a lot of times, what I will do with myself, which is what I told all of my students, what I tell them during quarantine, is like I say I'm gonna write 3 pages every day, and that to me is like a doable amount, especially with screenwriting, especially with playwriting, like you can get 3 pages out of on final draft of a play or a screen, like you can just sit there and do it. So I do at least 3 pages, and a lot of times that turns into doing 10 pages because by the time you're 3 pages in, then you're like far enough in to actually sort of keep that momentum going.
Yeah, juices
Um,
are going then.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So that's something I tell my students a lot is like, it's like, you just have to kind of sit down and commit to doing a little bit, and that's what I do because my brain really rebels against the, like, you're going to sit down and write 20 pages today, as I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to sit down and write 3 pages. And I find for me, like, I can usually write 10 to 20 pages a day, which is a lot, I know.
Yeah.
If I really am like in the flow with something. Revision is a little bit different. Revision sometimes goes fast and sometimes it goes really slow. So I've
Yeah.
been in that revising process also. And that's like has been a slower process for me than the drafting process.
So, are you writing every day?
I have been. I actually just took my first like 2 days off in the last couple days because I wrote that screenplay, I wrote a play, I wrote my pilot, and then I had a commission that I was writing for this company Less Than Three, that I had to turn around in like a couple weeks. And then once I was done with that, I was like, I need a couple days off.
Yeah.
So I took a couple days.
But generally, you're writing every day if you can.
Yeah.
And so, do you write in the morning when you first get up, or do you write in the afternoon or at night? When do you find time?
I tend to alternate. Like I'll go through stretches of writing in the morning and writing at night. Lately, I've been writing at night more, probably starting around 11 or 11:30 is probably when I sit down. It's just like a quiet, really quiet time of day, when I can sit down and really like dig into something, you know?
Yeah.
So that's been, quarantine writing for me has been night writing. But I think that's also because, I mean, it's like time doesn't really exist. So it's like, you know, do whatever, whenever.
Yeah. Yeah. Time has no bearing at this point. It's all just time in the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, it doesn't really matter if you nap or go to bed at 2 or wake up at 11. Like, it's just whatever you do.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of stuff do you, when you sit down and write, what kind of stuff do you need to have? Do you want music on? Do you want, do you have a comfy chair that you like? Like, how do you do it?
This is where I write. So I love to sit at my desk. I sit at my desk and I have a window. I look out on this field, which is really great. It's like this beautiful field with these lovely trees. And so there's a lot of like window staring involved. And I've gotten into the habit of like, I have like Post-its all over my desk. So I keep Post-it colors for every project I'm working on. And anytime I have a thought about that project, I put it on a Post-it and I put it on my desk because as my fiance Tim knows, anytime something is immediately out of my sight, it is gone from me. So I've like solved that problem by keeping all of the ideas I'm currently working with like in front of me at all times. So I'll just sort of like go to that section of the Post-it library. And for some reason for me, like Post-it notes are a good way to trick myself into writing because it doesn't feel like real. I'm like, you're not really writing. You're just putting something down on a Post-it note, you know? And so then a lot of times that'll help me to sit down and like, I'll be like, oh, I had this little nugget, or I had this whole scene that I wrote out on Post-it notes, which I do sometimes do. And then I'll sit down and like start with that. So that's been a real necessity for me lately. Because I do feel like with quarantine, one thing is that like just with the news cycle and everything, my mind is really jumbled. There's just a lot going on, you know? And so the focus piece for me of like sitting down and actually starting to focus on something is actually, I feel like, the most challenging thing. So having a little something to start with is really helpful.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of research? I know some of your things, I mean, for the play that we're working on with you, Brilliance is about science and about explorers and all kinds of different things. So do you do a lot of research before you start writing, or how do you manage that?
Brilliance was interesting because I did do a lot of research because that was, I heard an interview with an oceanographer, Sylvia Earle, that I really loved. And so that kind of launched me into this, like, I was like, I think I want to write a play about this. And then I read this great book by this astrophysicist, Jane Levin, who I think teaches at Columbia or Barnard. And she wrote this book called How the Universe Got Its Spots. That's sort of like about her being a young physicist and dealing with like romance in her life and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so those two things were like, I think of them as sort of like the centerpiece, like moments of starting to work on that play, you know? And then from there, I really dove into like specific research about like what station would they have been at if they were really in Antarctica, you know, what would their outfits have looked like, you know? And a lot of times I'll do that as I'm drafting to be like, as questions come up, I'll be like, oh, well, what would this be? And because the information really feeds me to think more creatively, you know, oh, they have red parkas. Oh, that's interesting. You know, what would that look like? Or that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I think that, you know, when people write about things that are so widely varied in topic, and, you know, at the end of the day, probably a lot of plays are about the human condition and all those things, but then the trappings are all so different. Antarctica, oceanography, soldiers in Iraq coming back, you know, that was in the Reckless season, which we did. So, I mean, it's just so fascinating when people sort of are able to go so far abroad to get different sort of context for things.
Yeah. I just finished for my adaptation seminar this semester. I wrote a like a song cycle play about 12th century female troubadours in southern France. Yeah, right. But that was really fun because I was like, I want to write a love story, you know, and I was like, and I always have wanted to make a rock concert. So I was like, you know, there's this like 50-year period in southern France, and I honestly cannot remember how I found out about this. Like I don't know.
Right.
But there was like this 50-year period during the Crusades when like these women troubadours emerged and like wrote these really great songs, and I just sort of like, oh, this is such a great way to look at love. You know, it's in the courtly love era, so it's like these songs, the songs of love in France were like very popular. So I was like, oh, this is a great way to look at love. You know, is so that there is research, but then it's also like looking at the human condition through time and how it doesn't change. You know, like how things don't change, or how.
I imagine in a situation like that, where not a lot of people are going to have a context for what that should look like or what it should sound like, it sort of gives you carte blanche to create it for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially because there's only music for one of the songs, like they don't have any music, they just have the words, you know?
Mhm.
So then it becomes this really interesting question of like, okay, well, how do you translate that to an audience now, you know? Because you don't necessarily go like, okay, I'm going to recreate the medieval songs, but it's like, well, what would we relate to now? Like, how do I make something we would relate to now if
Yeah,
we're talking about these like essentially teenage girl pop stars, you know?
that's amazing. So we talked about Brilliance a little bit. Where are you in the writing process for Brilliance? We did a reading of it in December of 2019. Is that right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Um, and so where is it? What's the status on it now?
It's still, I'm still working with that draft that we worked with. Yeah. And then I guess, yeah, the most recent thing I did was draft that into a screenplay,
Right.
which was super, super fun and super interesting. And, yeah, it revealed a lot. I feel like another thing it did was it opened up little boxes in the story for me, you know, where I was like, oh, you know, um, it was freeing in a sort of an interesting way, you know, and different things emerged, like the wedding ring became this symbol, this circle, you know, thinking about the Mobius strip, you know, I was like, oh, well, the wedding ring can be this circle, this reflective circle, you know,
Mhm.
it kind of does the same work. And like the dust in the play became really important because I was like, oh, we could film this dust, you know, and think about dust and stars and all these different things. So it became a way to think about the play in a different way. And that was really, really cool. And it made me reinvested, I think, in the story itself, you know. It's interesting because it's a play I haven't really sent out at all. Like, I like really just with you guys, I've worked on it. But I was like, I just like this play so much, you know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, what else do you have coming up besides? Well, I mean, obviously things are somewhat on hold for a little bit, but do you have?
Right.
Do you have? Can you talk about the commission, or can you talk about some other stuff?
Yeah, this is a really fun. I'm very excited about this. Some friends of mine from Texas started this company called Less Than Three that is actually focused around doing digital theater experiences. And so I'm writing a choose your own adventure play set in the time of COVID-19 that's going to take place on Zoom. And it's called a collective noise. And it has 3 great actresses in it, and it'll be in June. And it is really fun. It's looking at all kinds of things. It is a play I did research for because it is actually about women in the labor movement.
Sure.
But it is also kind of about the premise is that it's these 3 girls who are trying to recreate their college's elaborate educational theater production that had 30 people and really big sets and all these dance numbers and songs and everything over Zoom with 3 people extra credit in their class. So the audience is asked to bring some things to help them out. And we're really having a lot of fun, sort of like the commission was really, you know, we really want to use Zoom. Like, how do we actually use the features of Zoom to make something fun and interesting, creative? So yeah, so I have been working on that. We had our first rehearsal last night and it was really fun.
And
So yeah, that's coming
that'll
in
be
June.
available. People can check that out. When's it coming up?
I think it opens the first weekend in June, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And there's going to be, you know, Facebook marketing, that kind of thing, that'll be up. And yeah, we're hoping we're going to run it for 3 performances and then see what kind of, there's very limited audience. It's like 15 people per time just because
Right.
there's a lot of interaction with the audience in a non-awful way. I know we don't all love audience interaction.
Sure. Yeah.
But no one can like touch you or anything, you know? So
Right.
yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll run it for a couple weekends. We're going to kind of see how things go. But
Yeah, that's a great test case for how this can really work. You know, we've been having conversations here about what can be done with Zoom and is it worth it? And is there screen fatigue? And is there, what's all the things that are happening? So it's always interesting to see people sort of try and take it and figure out what can be, you know, what it can be made into.
Yeah. I think for me, like when Alec, the producer, and Allison, the director, kind of approached me about doing it, I was like, you know, for me, if I'm going to make something, it has to be like made for this platform. You know, it has to be using this platform and interacting with this platform. And, you know, for me, I was like, I want to make it intentionally for this, you know, and that was what was really important to me. And also I felt like it was really important to me to write something about how we can't actually do theater, like about the things that we miss, you know, about like we can't hold hands, we can't be together, we can't sing together. There's a lot in the play about trying to sing together and clap together and just like you know, how that stands in for how we can't necessarily really be together right now, you know.
Yeah.
But that there is something we can do, you know. So I think that was kind of like what I wanted to do in the play, was to really acknowledge where we are and the truth of where we are, and that there are things that just can't live in this platform, you know.
Yeah. All right, we're almost done. Last thing, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. If you were giving advice to a writer, you probably do this all the time, right, in your classes, but what's the best piece of advice you give to writers when you talk to them?
Oh gosh. The 3 pages a day thing.
I'll cheat if you want. I'll cheat.
Yeah.
I've been watching the Aaron Sorkin master classes for grad school. And like first thing right out of the gate, he's like, don't put a finger to a keyboard if you don't have an obstacle.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Like he doesn't really character, nothing. Like have an obstacle and then figure it out from there. And I'm like, all right.
You know, I feel like actually one of the things is for writers to really use the medium that they're writing in as a piece of what they're writing. You know, for me, the stage is a metaphorical space. You know, anything you put in on a stage, a set you put on a stage has meaning in the play, you know, and in the same way, anything you're showing on camera really has meaning in the play. Something I've really been talking to my students about lately is like, you know, really think about like, you know, if you're putting an office on stage, what is that saying about the story that you're telling? You know, if you have this in a shot, you know, not just to think about the literal story, oh, I'm moving from A to B to C to D, but really to think about like this larger level of like, what is this saying about the story that I'm telling? You know, what is this really, really saying? So I think to me, like, as I work in different media, that has really become important to me, is to really like honor and work in the medium that you're working in, and use it, you know, use it in a way that you couldn't in a different way.
That's awesome. That's great. All right. That's probably a great place to end it.
Perfect.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is really fun.
And we'll see you soon.
Okay, sounds good.